Since we're on planet Earth, we are part of the planet. I mean, these masturbatory fantasies of going to Mars and living on Mars, we wouldn't be human anymore. Our humanity is part of participating in the life of this planet. That sense of that estrangement from the body of Earth right here is because we've been hypnotized by years and years of this philosophy of separation. So, of course, we're going to be separate from here.
Welcome to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast, where the body is the teacher and sensation is the path. I'm your host, James Humecky. Here we dive into intimacy, truth, erotic intelligence, and the raw edges of being fully alive. Heads up, this isn't always safe for work. Some episodes include explicit language, erotic themes, and conversations not meant for little ears. This space isn't sanitized, it's real. You've been warned. So if you're ready to feel all of it, come on in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. My name is James Humecky and I'm your host. And today we're going to talk to just this really fully embodied man, Jamie McHugh. Jamie is a master somatic movement therapist, interdisciplinary artist, and creator of Somatic Expression. He's got over 40 years of experience and has developed a unique body of work integrating somatic practices with expressive arts, eco-somatics, and contemplative photography. The photography is amazing. This episode, we're going to explore the intersection of inner and outer nature, embodiment as artistic and ecological activism, and the 5 core somatic technologies he teaches: breath, vocalization, contact, movement, and stillness. I do want to say that we're going to be talking also about the rewilding of the body as a return to elemental self. I mean, that, we'll unpack that as we go along. And this is this relationship between embodiment and spiritual ecology. So Jamie, thank you for coming onto the show, and it's just so good to see you after so much time. The last time we saw each other was in Mendocino, California, and what was that? That was pre-pandemic. That was a while ago. So where are you now, and what the hell are you up to?
So I'm living in a co-housing community in the hills of Massachusetts, western Massachusetts. We share 80 acres of land with 10 other households. So my husband and I moved here just a year ago. So this is a grand new adventure. And we weren't looking for co-housing, even though we wanted to live rurally and have community. And so when this house came on the market, it was like, oh, duh. Okay. Of course. That's what we want to do. And so it's been, pretty amazing to be here and to settle in and feel like, this is the land that makes sense for my soma and my psyche. And I'm really happy to be here.
Well, actually that kind of takes me into a question one of the themes that we were going to talk about, and that is the eco-somatics. So here you are in nature in a co-housing with a community garden. You just showed me some of your fresh asparagus, and in the development of your somatic expression, this term eco-somatics has been coming in. I've been reading your work and I've been following your work for some time. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and how that moves, how that is in your work and how you feel, how you sense that, how you embody that.
So I think a point of reference would be to start historically. In 1986, I came to California to apprentice with the dance pioneer Anna Halprin. She was based in Marin County, and her husband, Larry Halprin, had been the landscape architect for Sea Ranch, which is a community on the Sonoma coast. And so she would bring her training program to Sea Ranch for the month of October. So at the beginning of our training program, we in the environment every day, moving on the beach, in the woods. And, you know, most people, when they think of dance in a studio with mirrors, and it's enclosed. And Anna's contribution to postmodern dance was taking dance outside. She used to work on her dance deck in Marin County. She started that like in the 50s. So this was kind of a radical approach to the body in space. So the body not surrounded by the, proscenium arch and this representational view of the self, but it was more the immersion of the body in life, and particularly in the life of the natural environment. So to be surrounded by sand and sky, ocean, and just the all of that input simultaneously while crawling in the sand, or being buried in the sand, or climbing a tree, so this interaction with the environment
Mhm.
was quite amazing for me. I'd never really experienced that before, even though I'd spent a lot of time camping in the wilderness and things like that. But to bring the expressive body into nature was new to me. Um, And so, as I apprenticed with Anna and taught at the Institute, essentially I inherited a lot of different opportunities to teach. And one of it was the week long residential at Point Reyes in the summer. That was part of the summer intensive. And I did that from 1989 to 2007. So that gave me a laboratory every summer of knowing a group was coming, and working with a group. And I realized that as I continued to evolve my own work kind of in tandem with Anna's, that I was less interested in what I would call what the environment was evoking for people psychologically. And actually, I was interested in going to that next level of identification with when we clear out the psyche of who we think we are and really begin to respond on a sensory level, almost in a transpersonal way. Who do we be? I mean, in a way, it's like taking us back into our origin story. And I mean our origin story as human beings on the planet. So, in that sense, my kind of work in this realm of eco-somatics is championing primal experience of the body as an element of nature, and beginning to dissolve that separation that many of us feel in the world. So
And
was
yeah,
that was that a good summary?
that is so good. That is so good. I mean, I'm so glad to have you on here and talking about this because, before we started this, we were having a little conversation about your work in this new piece you just sent me called Murmurations. But part of what that did is we talked about, like, the idea of somatics and it being something that oftentimes is only spoken about as in my body, our body. What are we doing in our body? I mean, I talk about, sensation-based awareness. And so there's two little threads that I'm working on here. One is that first off, so many people are so disconnected from just the awareness of what's happening in their body that it takes some time. I know in my coaching practice that it takes time to get people to feel even that, getting into the breath, getting into some movement, some comprehensive touch, and just the awareness of that. And then the next, because the next level, like what you're talking about, is that we are also the environment that we are in. We are also the people that we are in communication with. And so then that definition of somatics expands just exponentially from there, it feels like to me. And what I'm asking you is to maybe dive in a little bit deeper into that piece. Like you're scraping the surface right at the moment, and I know you got a lot more in there.
Well, the image that just came to mind as you were speaking is it's like Russian nesting dolls.
Mhm.
The one doll is inside another, inside another, inside another. And or you could also think of like a fractal pattern that in starting with the self, and particularly the biological self, the world of tissue and bone and cellular respiration, all of that that's happening inside of us is happening outside of us. And so there is that sense of from all the way out to all the way in. Really, since we're on planet Earth, we are part of the planet. I mean, these masturbatory fantasies of going to Mars and living on Mars, we wouldn't be human anymore. We just wouldn't be human. Our humanity is part of participating in the life of this planet. And the more that we can recognize that interdependence of self with place, of humans as participants on the planet with all these other life forms, and how there is a reciprocity and relational process going on, I think is really vital. And so I constantly come back to what is nature saying to us. I used to use the expression the wisdom of the body, and I don't use that anymore. I say the wisdom of nature because it's much larger. We can become as human beings so narcissistically involved with
What? Wait a minute.
right. We're the end all and be all. We're human beings. We are greater than all those other animals on Earth. It's just like, come on,
Yeah.
get off your
High horse, yeah, so to
your
speak.
high horse, your pedestal.
Yeah.
But but I think ultimately, when we come back to like what you said about when you're first working with clients, that sense of that estrangement from the body of Earth right here is because we've been hypnotized by years and years of this philosophy of separation. So, of course, we're going to be separate from here.
Manifest destiny and
Yeah, absolutely.
independent,
Yeah.
yada yada yada. Yeah, absolutely. So, because I want to come back to this other piece too, but how would you bring somebody who is just complete, I want to say neophyte, but has not done that inner work yet in that disconnect? How would you bring somebody into that place where then they can expand into the sense that they are part and parcel of this environment, to this earth?
Well, I've developed, I mean, over the years of teaching and guiding and, kind of gathering resources from different disciplines, my work has covered this and that. And really it was, I'd say in the last 15, 20 years, I've tried to like kind of like really just dial in to what I consider three branches of my work:
Mhm.
lying down, sitting, and moving into relationship with the environment.
Mm.
And so when I say that, for example, you say, well, how do you do that? I try to start with very practical and simple ideas. So why don't we do one right now?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, why not?
You're not gonna make me
That's why I
lie
always
down
say,
though, right?
it's like, I can always just like talk forever, but for me,
No, but
what's
I
always
love it. Yes,
important
let's
is
give
that people have
everybody
a
a,
felt
a real
experience.
experience here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your body, take a moment just to put one hand on your chest and one hand on your, we use that expression, I feel so out of contact with myself. So I like to say, well, make contact.
Mm.
And as you let your hands come to rest on your body, notice what's there in those points of contact. How much surface does your hand cover? What's the quality of contact? And just for fun, because we pay attention to things according to contrast. So notice what happens if you press your hands inwards, in towards your center. Just add a little bit of density to your touch. Notice what that evokes, how that feels, what you sense, what you imagine. And then gradually soften the contact. Soften. See how much you can soften so that you're still in contact with your structure. And linger there for a moment. And meanwhile, begin to notice how the river of your breath is moving underneath your hands. Kind of like the underground aquifers in the earth. That circulation of movement. And once you get into the groove of your own breathing, noticing the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the pause, how it begins to shift and change simply because you're bringing your attention there. And now the next step with your hands, just very gradually begin to take them off the surface of your structure. And notice the space between your hands and your structure. And just very gently moving the hands towards and away your structure. So, of course, our body doesn't begin and end at the level of the skin. There is what we refer to as the parapersonal space. And notice the quality of the space as you continue to massage it with your hands, coming closer and farther away. Every now and then pausing if you want to pause. Maybe releasing the exhale out through your mouth. So there's no right or wrong way to do this, just simply to play with these ideas. And then once again, let your hands land on your belly and chest. Noticing any change that might have occurred between the first time your hands landed and your hands making contact now. And with this point of contact, aquifers of your breath moving, go ahead and open your eyes and just look around at the world. So you extend your perception outwards, let the environment come to you. And just simply notice the quality of perception right now. Are things brighter or more diffused? And how is it to both sense your body with your hands making contact and to perceive the space around you?
Wow. I'm gonna
And that, of course,
just
can keep going and going and
gonna
going, but
go to bed now. I'm sorry. Oh, Jamie, yeah, you know that the when I first put my hands on, my hands were moist, like sweaty almost, and I felt a jittery from the coffee that I had this morning. And moving through that piece, I really love that where you move the hands in and out, and you can feel that sort of kind of almost like a rubber band, like pushing against a rubber ball or something feeling, you do that with this kind of motion and stuff too. But and and you're right, it does like it that immediately everything is like a little more expanded, a little more dropped in, obviously, and connected. I think that's you sent me this the murmurations, this
well, before
oh,
you move to
I'm sorry.
before you move to that, though, I want to add an addendum for your listeners, which
Okay.
is this idea that our initial kind of sensory feedback is like kind of like you said afterwards. Oh, I could go to sleep now. I'm in that zone. And sometimes that can feel like that's where it ends, right? For me, that's where it actually begins.
Mhm.
Cultivating this awareness of receptivity, that coming close to ourselves being with our breath, drops us into, and that's where, for me, the magic begins. Because one of the things I don't think people really think about, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, fight or flight, sympathetic, parasympathetic, rest and digest, that when we are in the parasympathetic, we're receptive. And it's that receptivity that's an antidote to what I'd call the sympathetic drive of culture, getting things done, being productive, that is a habit of attention and bodily organization. And so flipping it this way, to begin to privilege more the parasympathetic, or what I would call the feminine principle of receptivity, allows us to like really notice what's alive internally. Just that much of repeating that each day. I sometimes say, you take just 5 minutes a day of breathing room, making contact, slowing down, resetting and recalibrating, begins to shift consciousness, right? And I think that's what's really essential. How do we shift consciousness to be aware of what's happening internally and then extend that perception out into the world? So I just wanted to add that.
No. That's I mean, it's perfect because that's what we are talking about with the eco-somatics and that sense of expanding the conversation from just the limited, what's happening in my body to what's happening around us all the time. And it seems to me too that in that, as one practices those things, this has been my experience, and maybe you can talk about that, but it becomes more automatic, or it becomes more habitual, like, that it isn't always necessary. I mean, I think it is necessary to stop and take the time, but also I can just sit down and take a breath and go like, okay, I'm here, kind of developing that sense that's there. And so it becomes more, I really think it's who we are. Like, I think it's really what our nature is. It's just in modern times, we've shut ourselves off with, cement and buildings and, fake fabrics and all kinds of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Let's cut all the trees down and, it's that kind of thing. But, um, yeah, so developing that as a more consistent piece of who we are.
Right. And, my pithy little saying that I always like to use, which is whatever we repeat is what we're actually learning and what we're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the good news and the bad news about the nervous system is it's the recorder of experience, and anything that we repeat, that becomes part of our repertoire. Because it's a habit, it's in the background of awareness, right? It's acting through us. Now, that's really useful with things like we took a long time as infants to learn how to stand up. And once we mastered that, boy, we were out in the world just going for it. Think about if every day when you woke up, you had to relearn walking or putting your clothes on, or et cetera, et cetera. So that our nervous system is incredibly efficient at normalizing and, in a sense, enacting our movement behavior. And at a certain point, so that's the good news. The bad news is it can be maladaptive, and we can keep continuing our habits of thought and movement that encase us in a very narrow bandwidth of perception and action, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, so here's like a really good, thing. I mean, I am an advocate of walking without encumbrances. So what I mean by that is carrying a bag, looking at the phone, all these things, that the action, the contralateral pattern of
Mhm.
walk crossing the midline, letting the arms swing, letting your attention take in things, looking up, looking down, all this variation that can happen in the simple dance of walking is an incredible tonic for the healthy human animal, right? It is, you know, the contralateral pattern crossing over the midline is, in a sense, the not the end point, but it's like the highest point of evolution in terms of our inherited movement behavior. And yet, since we walk all the time, we can, get into all kinds of stuff with it, right? In
Well, that's
terms of,
part about the awareness piece, like, like taking that moment, like, oh, how am I walking? And not even with the judgment of like, oh, I'm walking bad, but like,
right,
how am I moving? Feldenkrais was really good about that. He's like, it's not just what is your body doing, not,
right.
yeah.
And to begin to play with that and feel it
Yeah.
and just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, oh, a walk is such good medicine. I don't need to go to the gym. I don't need to do a complicated Pilates routine. I don't have, but
Not
so
that
there's,
any of those things are bad. It's just that,
right,
you don't have to do that, right? Necessarily.
right. And so, I mean, that's the thing is that and this is part of that, part of culture. We're really good at specialization. We're
Mhm.
really good at taking and developing something. But after a while, what happens is all that specialization removes us from the basics.
Right. Limits what we actually do and can do.
Right. Because it's like, I need the next new thing. I need that. It's like, come back down to earth, come back down to the basics. Right. So
Crawling,
that's
rolling.
the horse I flog. That's
Yeah.
the horse I flog.
Well, we can talk about flogging. But that's sorry, that's my other that's my other podcast. Um,
Right.
but the playfulness,
Hmm.
I know that Anne was, just an amazing mover, and then everything that was happening in the Bay Area, you have Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, and you have the guy that developed Access Syllabus, and you have all these different modalities, but they all kind of talk about the same thing, like move your body in as many different ways as you can. Remember what you can do or what you could do as a child. It's not that we it seems to me like it's not that we lose the ability. We do what you said, like we specialize and just kind of get stuck in that routine. And
Hmm.
it does seem to be like a double-edged sword. It's like it's good to really develop something and hone it and get good at it, but then you got to keep bringing yourself back to that more expansive place too. It seems like I like walking barefoot, getting
Hmm.
on the ground. I'm a big
Sure.
advocate for barefoot movement. So
And what's interesting, and what you were just talking about, I mean, I think of it kind of this way,
mhm.
which is in building and honing something, it's really like about the vertical dimension, whereas the horizontal is like, what happens when I try this or that, or when I include that? And so, how to remember it's important to have a practice that we cultivate and at the same time diversify. And it's the same thing with, learning an instrument. They found that, for example, musicians that practice in the same way, uh, their learning curve isn't as great as people who continue to work on a piece but begin to vary it, even if it's just a tiny little bit,
Mhm.
so that the learning that happens, as long as there's enough subtle variation, keeps things fresh. And I think that's what's really important. How do we keep ourselves fresh and available to the moment? And part of that, coming back to what you said about kids, part of it is our attitude and our playfulness. And you look across the board at almost any creative activity, its foundation is playfulness, the ability to play. And sometimes playfulness can, in a sense, be contraindicated if we are trying to maintain a bodily ego that, is circumscribed, uh, because, I have a self to protect, my very important self, right?
Very
So,
important self.
so there, so there's all this stuff swimming together, right?
It's just as it, the I look at it like the nervous system, our body, the whole system is its one goal is to make sure that we are safe in our environment, you know? And so we were talking about, some of those maladaptive behaviors. They were they are maladaptive to a certain extent, but they were perfectly adaptive to maybe a really screwed up situation, if we were, a childhood, an abusive childhood, or, something like that. And so we developed those, ways of protecting ourselves, keeping ourselves safe, and they are maladaptive. But here's the deal is like, because the nervous system and the brain is so adaptive and plastic that we can actually unlearn those things or relearn how to play, relearn how to come back into our natural bodies, and it seems like we need a certain amount of uh, containment, and we need the novelty. We need the, so being able to move back and forth between those things consciously would be really, that would be the
Well,
main
well,
goal for
well.
me.
Before, when I was mentioning kind of the way that I've shaped my work. So, for example, the sitting practice I teach that I call embodied mindfulness is a way to bring in all these various kind of somatic skills into the practice of sitting.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And and so, for example, sitting is the midway point between lying down and full kind of letting go, or standing up where there's more mobility and less support. And so in sitting, I can really begin to articulate the movement of my breath in different ways, begin to have an inner dialogue, begin to express the breath as sound, to use contact to reinforce awareness, etc., etc. So the container of sitting is a way to begin to diversify what is happening in the different dimensions of our bodily self. So that structure or containment then creates the support for outward expansion. So I can move out from that, but back in. And so for me, that's been a very powerful way to bring kind of somatic resources and awareness into just something as simple as sitting. How can you be in your structure with comfort and ease? How can you allow all these micro movements that are happening to become more visible? How can you spread your attention around? Because quite honestly, I think what I'm teaching more than anything else is just attention,
Yeah.
because our attention has been hijacked by, the world of technology
Yeah.
in a way that's really detrimental, as far as I'm concerned, to the life of the planet, because we're living more and more in our heads in these virtual realities. And so attention. I can look out my window right now and look at a sumac tree, and I can let my attention linger. For some people, that's enormously hard, right? And that is the gift of nature. Nature, for the most part, is working at a different frequency than our technological brains. And so, how can we focus and harness this, and this has been the problem for humanity for years. The Buddhists years ago talked about the monkey mind. I mean, we
Right,
know
exactly.
that's been part and
Now we
parcel of
just
the
have better tools to support the monkey mind.
we have better tools
Like,
to support
okay,
the monkey mind. Yeah,
it's,
so we're just
it's a
like,
monkey mind circuit.
I mean, look at me. I can drive in my car at 60 miles an hour, and I can text, and I can,
Right,
it's just like by
exactly.
the time I arrive somewhere, I'm just kind of like, right. So, so it's like harnessing attention, and in that relaxing into relationship, slowing the frequency down.
Mhm.
It gives us a different leverage point in terms of how we ultimately pay attention to life, to ourselves, to notice those moments instead of getting lost in the hallucination of our thinking.
Boy, I mean, and don't you think too that, you did say something about, like when you're sitting and paying attention and even the micro movements that are happening in the body, which, the whole idea of stillness is a little bit of a misnomer because you can't actually you never really come to full stillness. That doesn't happen. Really, I mean, I guess until you die, but even then the body and things are moving and there's microbes and there's all kinds of stuff happening, right? And
Right.
you know, if, I mean, I've done Vipassana sits, a number of them, and you realize how much is actually going on in the body and how that is, on that micro level or that, slowed down level. And so, if the monkey mind needs some occupation, if you occupy it with that, it is just, I mean, that's maybe putting it to really good use. Because then when you come out of it and into the, at least my experiences and come out of it into the world, right? There's there's a slowdown. There's more of an ability to connect without needing the device or the constant input, because you see it's happening all the time, but on that natural level, you know it doesn't stir my nervous system up in the way that watching something on the computer does. Or yeah.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that point of there is so much stimulation happening around us that, in a sense, we tune out or push away or kind of ignore, and our selective attention goes to those devices or however we're wired to, in a sense, occupy the mind, occupy the monkey mind. And that's why in my work, in terms of working with the five technologies, it's the cross fertilization of them that gives the body enough stimulation to start occupying the mind. I mean, I always say that's the biggest challenge I have. How can I create structures and experiences for people that have just enough stimulation to occupy the mind long enough so the body can make a change? Right? I mean,
That's awesome. That
that's
is
the trick,
really,
right?
yeah, that is great.
Got to occupy the mind, not to like, you know, empty the mind.
Right.
It's is one of my favorite quotes. Shunryu Suzuki said, "The goal of practice is not to uh, empty the mind. The goal of practice is to let the mind pervade the whole."
Hey there. I am so glad you're here, and I hope you're enjoying the show. And if you are, be sure and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You know the drill, and it really helps us out. And if something hits home or you have a question, please leave a comment. I look forward to the interactions and I read them all. Thank you so much. And now on with the show. Right. Right. Yeah.
And
That's
I think
kind of what I was talking about
that's it in a
earlier.
nutshell, right? That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because, through our modern times, there's so many things that we now have more access to than through all of our evolutionary development. Sugar, salt, and fat are one thing, because now you can go buy a whole 5 pounds of sugar and just pour it down your throat if you want. It used to be something that was a rare and precious commodity. you know Salt, the same thing. What we've done with alcohol, a natural form of alcohol, is something that is actually medicinal for the body, helps with digestion and whatnot. But no, we're going to take that as human beings, and in our infinite wisdom going to turn that into 140 proof Everclear. And yeah. And then it feels like we've done the same thing with technology. We have those, we've always had natural technologies. We have our hands, we can use tools, but now we've gone ahead and just like, let's just over create the thing, that is needed, or that is natural. But I
In a similar way, I mean, this is the edge that we're riding. Technology has made our lives easier. So, for example, I live rurally, but I live in a house with heat. I live in a house with running water, right? With a toilet. I mean, when you think about, wasn't that long ago, a couple of generations ago, and for some people, even less than a couple of generations ago, that houses did not have indoor plumbing.
right.
They did not have this and that. So by necessity, we had to use our bodies to accomplish daily tasks. Now we don't. So we don't need the body of survival as much as we did. Once again, good news and bad news. There's always a trade-off. It's great. And it tends to create sloth and sedentary habits, right? Because we can be comfortable. And yet at the same time, the way we are designed by nature is we are designed for effort and release, right? Contraction, release, you know,
Dynamic tension.
and the kind of the moving in different spheres. And so we have to, in a way, understand and appreciate and use our bodies in certain ways that are challenging. And also, we can also now move into from this body of survival now into what I consider the body of grace. And in that, what I mean by that is that we can begin to fine tune our repertoire of movement and affect and perception
Uh,
because we have the ability to do it now. We didn't have it 2 generations, 3 generations ago,
because
but
we
we
were so
have.
much in survival. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Our whole time was occupied with finding food and keep staying warm and
Right. And just being
elements and
exhausted at the
whatnot.
end of the day and,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that. I mean,
So
we had a certain vitality, but it was a struggle. And now we actually have the ability to go deeper into kind of kind of like we're discovering with the mycelial network underground, that we're
oh my
discovering all
gosh,
the
yeah.
things on the planet that exist. And how about discovering all the things in this planet that exist and become
The fascial web, so much like the mycelial web, and
right.
yeah.
And that really gets in for me into what, your podcast, somatic pleasure, that pleasure can be generated through this being that we've inherited, this mystery that is us. And that's mind blowing because we've been conditioned to think I need this product or that product, or, this or the commercialization and capitalization of experience, instead of just like, you've got an amazing, amazing ecosystem within you that's in relationship to this outer ecosystem. And there is so much just delicious pleasure to be experienced simply by being alive, right?
Oh God, Jamie, I love the words. I love the expression, of this because I can't tell you for how long I've talked about the body as an ecosystem. You know, anyways, but you know, not but and we sort of started to talk about it a second ago, but the five technologies, because these are tools, these are ways of doing exactly what you're talking about. Like, okay, now how do we do that,
Mhm.
So can you outline those technologies? What are they, and maybe a little
Sure.
bit of how you use them?
So I used to, so rewinding the tape. So it basically in 2000, um, I did a sabbatical. I did a house sit and sea ranch because I, was reflecting on my work up to that point, and I thought, okay, I do these workshops. People have a great experience, and it's awesome. But what are they left with when they go back to their lives? What are they left with? You know, um, I don't want to be just entertainment or distraction. It's like I want to offer kind of a roadmap for people to have ways to self regulate, to work with themselves, independent of my guidance, independent of, showing up for a workshop. So I went on this sabbatical and I started to think, okay, in all these various somatic disciplines I've been introduced to, what are the connecting threads? Like what's important in the body of work? Is there hands-on work? Is there movement? Is it yeah, da, 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 da. So then that's when I realized, and I originally called them the five languages of the body.
Mm,
Breath, and of course, that's the most basic of actions. And of course, the thing that we can really collaborate with because it's both automatic and volitional. And, it's time honored, in the pantheon of spiritual disciplines. And vocalization, really the breath made visible as sound and the vibration that happens due to that. And a lot of that really came from my relationship with Emily Conrad Daoud and Continuum
hmm.
and the idea of
We'll continue.
repetitive sound vibration guiding one deeper and deeper into the ecosystem of the body, particularly in this interface between making sound and feeling the vibration. So, hands as resonators, so that the sense of instead of projecting sound outwards, which is the way most of us have learned, to sing or whatever, it's actually using sound as a way to generate internal movement.
Mm,
And because the muscle attachments on the bones, and bones being the best conductor of vibration in the body, that little bit of vibration is stimulating these little micro movements. And because these micro movements are being stimulated, the amygdala, the powerful amygdala of the brain that detects threat, it's not just threat, it detects novelty. So that little bit of movements, like, the brain's lighting up. It's like, what's going on? And, so anything that's new doesn't always have to be seen through the lens of threat. It's just novelty, right? So anyway, so working with vocalization, which ultimately leads into the expressive act of sound and song, uh, contact. And very often when we think of contact, we think of contact, somebody else, something else. Self contact is a way to begin to cultivate a more intimate relationship with ourselves. And that's really the way I see it. And that there's so many different ways to use contact. We did it a little bit in the practice, of density, of lightness, of hovering, some, EFT uses, tapping. I mean, there's all these different ways that contact and self-contact are part of different healing systems. But I also think of it as our skin, the major organ of our body, the biggest organ of our body. Implicit in touch is reassurance. I'm okay. Coming back to your word, I'm safe. Right? What does a crying infant want? A crying infant wants contact, that reassurance, and it comes through the skin and contact. It's like, okay, so how can we, in this way of self-attachment, be our own parent? Right? The simplicity of it. The body understands this. The skin understands reassurance. And then what I always think of is I always think of the diaphragm as the mother muscle of the body, also extending that reassurance, right? Just that simple wave movement through the body. So the combination of breath and contact, self-safety. And then from there we go into, movement is just, movement is change of position, change of relationship to gravity, the early developmental map, crawling, walking, rolling, all the foundational kind of building blocks of movement capacity. And of all the technologies, I think stillness is the one that's really still needs a lot of investigation, in the sense of stillness for a lot of people means holding. It means freezing. And of course, freezing, as we know, is a trauma response. We certainly don't want to do practices with stillness that are just, end up supporting more freezing behavior, right? But that stillness as a dynamic state of being, of non-action, of settling, or as I like to sometimes think, of becoming breathing rock. That stillness is such an important, particularly now, antidote to nonstop action. And stillness, so the image I like to give of stillness, and especially in movement practice, is I was at a lake in Switzerland years ago, and I watched these fish, and they were wiggle, wiggle, glide. And I thought, oh, the glide, that's the stillness.
Wiggle, wiggle, glide. Yes.
Right? So that there's movement then, and it's stillness. It's receiving the aftermath of that action, and how, just like we have punctuation in a sentence, it's the same thing. I move, I'm still, move some more, still. And just like in the breath, we have the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the pause. So in a sense, bringing stillness into the foreground, whether it's just like a dab of stillness,
Gotcha.
or it's the stillness of the structure to then pay attention to other dimensions of what's happening. So I originally called those languages, and then I started to call them technologies, because I realized, well, everybody's talking about technology these days. So
Get
might
on
as well
board already with
right. Well, I get on board with it. Well, partly
yeah.
because what does technology do? Technology expands our sense of possibilities, expands
Mhm.
what we can perceive and know. And it's like, okay, these are your natural technologies. Let's go in and explore those. So I could go on and on about the 5 technologies, because I've been
We
thinking about it all along.
we might have to sit down with another conversation with that. But I am going to bring it back now to the thing to the murmurations, because
Okay,
this is
right.
actually a perfect lead into that. Because now, we will be dropping the link to that, if that's okay with you. We'll share that
Mm.
link with the audience, and we can talk about that. But as I was watching this, it wasn't, you called it a performance piece, I think, or it was in a well, I'll just let you talk about it. All I'm just going to say is that I saw all of these elements in this piece. So yeah, I'll let you go ahead and describe what it was for people and what you're putting across there.
Sure. Hmm. Well, let me say this. The last time I did any kind of performance piece was in 2019. I organized a performance benefit for the Sunrise Movement, young climate change activists. And I did it for my birthday because I was like, this is my 65th birthday, you know, and I'd done a few of these before at different birthdays, which is just gathered together a group of friends, performers, do a performance evening, have people come together and raise money for a good cause. So I think of those as fundraisers because it's always great to, show up in person and, kind of in communion with each other, right? Through this mechanism of performance. But this particular piece for me is kind of the distillation of all these different aspects of my own experience in education. And so I really want to acknowledge here the influence of the Kashaya Pomo healer, Lauren Smith. The Kashaya Pomo live in Northern California, right near Sea Ranch. It's a very small reservation. And Lauren was one of the healers that I met through Anna Halprin, and that I spent on and off 20 years somewhat apprenticing with him, coming, assisting him with healings. And one of the things I was really aware of with Lauren is that, he is the gatekeeper and caretaker of a tradition that has been part of the human world for years. That's very simply, we dance together, we sing together, we do hands on with each other, and that he would spontaneously guide these ceremonies. So there's the traditional Pomos ceremonies that I went to, but then there was his healing sessions that he did, and that he was really just following the way of the spirit. And that had a really big impact on me of realizing this is a step beyond improvisation. This is actually opening up the channels and really being guided by the spirit of the moment. And so in this piece, Murmurations, uh, I build it as a somatic sonic improvisation because I knew I was going to this conference. I kind of gave myself the task of doing it. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I just thought, oh, it's time to perform again. Once again, coming from just a very intuitive place. And and for me, it was like, I want to, and this is because I come out of this tradition of Anna Halpern and this idea of dances with purpose, that that dance in its original form as ritual was to evoke change, was to, in a sense, memorialize a moment of change, whether it's birth or death or a wedding or whatever. That dance in its original form was to weave together the community. So so the theme of the improvisation was, I wanted to pay attention to what was happening in current life, what was, you know, on the ground and in the air, and use that as the starting point. And my place where I go now for kind of just inspiration is the creek outside of my house, and where I dunk myself and then just sit in open attention afterwards, and very often just begin to sing and whatever arises.
Jamie,
And
I'm going to pause for a second. Sorry.
so, of course, as it's getting closer and closer to the conference, which was the Somatic Dance and Performance Festival in Geneva, New York, uh, of course, I'm percolating what's going on. And so a week before the conference, I was down, done my dip in the water, and I'm sitting there. And as I started to sing the uh, the Shabbos prayer, uh, kind of came forward. The Jewish prayer, the Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, et cetera, that's sung, which is basically welcoming the light of the universe to enter us. And in the sense of, because realizing that my attention had been very preoccupied with just all the conflicts happening, Kiev, Haifa, Gaza, just all of this. And I realized it's like, oh yeah, because I'd gone through different iterations of this improvisation for it, but nothing was just kind of sticking. But it was like when I sang that, I realized, oh, I'm performing on Friday night, which is traditionally when the Shabbos candles are lit. Okay, dialed into that. And then I was, thinking of those places of conflict. And of course, right before I got to the conference, the whole thing of bombing Tehran came on. So it was like, oh God, got to add Tehran too. It's like just all this, like, ah. And I remembered this beating of the chest, this mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And I was raised Catholic, and I was an altar boy, and the whole shtick, right? And so this beating of the chest and mea culpa means my fault, my most grievous fault. And it's just like, oh, okay. So I want to name those places, Haifa, Gaza. No, no. I want to beat the chest and I want to sing that song. That's all I knew. So when I went to perform, well, during the tech, uh, I started out with a breath and then went into a sound vibration. And the sound vibration kind of set the tone. And then, well, in the moment of performance, actualization, embodiment, whatever you want to call it, in the moment of that ritual, that for some reason all of a sudden went into these sounds, and I just started stroking up and down my body, and the sounds just animated that sense of just the distress and constriction and all of that, and I just remember, and in that moment, it's like I have no idea what's going on. I'm just following. I'm just witnessing and following. And when I started this, the beating of the chest, it was just like it just came pouring out. I just started crying, and I just stayed with that crying because that's what was there. And at that point, and aware of it's me and it's not me all at the same time. That what I'm putting out is resonating back in the field of the witnesses of the audience that are there, and that I'm simply this voice, this channel for our collective misery, our collective grief. And so by the time I then went from that into singing the Shabbos prayers, like somebody said to me later, it was just like the tenderness of that moment, so clear after just that, all viscosity. Oh yeah, at some point there's that whole spreading of the anger of that.
Yeah.
But it was like kind of like following through an organic process of giving voice to all of this stuff embedded in my experience and embedded in the experience of others. And so it was a catharsis. It was a clearing for me. I was very aware of that clearing the next morning, and but also in how people responded to it and talking to me afterwards. That there is that interface between the individual and the collective. And I realized in that moment that my being that conduit was powerful medicine for me, without a doubt, but was also powerful medicine for people that were there. And it reminded me of this wonderful saying that was, in Barbara Mettler's studio in Tucson. Barbara Mettler is one of our creative dance ancestors who was quite interesting. And she had a studio designed by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright's, this circular studio, just, I mean, absolutely gorgeous. But written around the ceiling was a quote from the Zuni people, which is, "We do not dance for ourselves. We dance for the life of our community." And when I first saw that quote on her studio on 86, when I was driving out to study with Anna, that has always stuck with me. And so in this piece, it felt like all of those worlds came to fruition. Yeah, that kind of the idea of dancing with purpose, of really working with, Emily's kind of freeing the sound and the vibration, and this being in the roundhouse with Lauren, and yeah, that this is for me, this is for us, and I'm grateful that I can offer that. So, and and just to say that I think that part of it is, I'm 70 now, and it's kind of like the clock's ticking. The clock's ticking. It's like, if not now, when? And there's a great liberation in that, of just, yeah, I'm I've arrived in my own skin, in my incarnation, and this integration of who I am with my craft feels like it's a ripe time. The fruit is here. The fruit is here.
I'm just here. You know, um, Jamie, when I was watching it, I mean, for one thing, just the stage setting, it's black box. It's very one focused spotlight on you. You're sitting in a chair, so you're not moving all over. But there was the expressiveness of it through your movement, through your voice, through the breath. Um, well, I mean, inspirational is one way to say it, but also it was deeply visceral, and it does have that impact. It is, for me, it's like all of our inner expressions. You're just doing it outward, and I'm so, well, honored, first off, just to be sitting here in your presence, and the way that you were able to just pull that out and give that expression and give permission to me, and I think to the other people that would watch that it's okay to do this. This is our humanity, and then bringing in that piece, that we're not just doing this for ourselves. I mean, there is that for ourselves, freeing ourselves from our own little construct, right? But like, oh no, I can't be too loud because God's
Uh-huh.
not gonna like that, or whatever it is. It's like, and then you know be loud and expressive and open and un scripted, you know. I mean, it is a beautiful performance piece, you know. One could say, oh, that is just like, that's been practiced for a long time. Da, 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 da. But what it really does is it speaks to the work you've been doing with yourself and with other people for so many years, decades.
Mhm.
And you know, to that place we were talking about where there's the practice, and then the practice becomes what you do. It becomes a part of who you are and your capacity. So thank you so much for and for doing that. Thank you so much. It just sounds so pithy, right? Thank you so much for doing that. It's just like
No, I.
I'm celebrating in my heart, really,
Mm,
you know,
mm,
to have that kind of expression in the world. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. And and for me, it comes back to this idea of what is ritual? What is ritual? Ritual is a container in time and space that allows our humanity in kind of just to like really just kind of be just the essence of it, right? It doesn't have to be long and elaborate. It's almost like a haiku. It's like just
Mhm.
get down to the basics. And I think of, because I years ago in San Francisco, I went to a Pentecostalist church down in the Tenderloin. It was primarily black folks,
Wow.
and it was awesome just to the music, and then people just kind of going into their thing and just realizing it's like, yeah, you could say that's like Bercelli's work. I think that's his name, TRE, tremor
I
release,
know who
right?
you're talking about. Yeah.
Right, that kind of thing. It's been part of our human experience for so long to create those containers for the non-ordinary to happen, to be celebrated, to understand the value for the self and the community for these rituals. And um, I think in a way, in modern Western culture, perhaps we need to really begin to think, what are the ritual cultural spaces that can help contain and form these experiences? Because I think we need them. It's one of my huge concerns about what I would call the proliferation of mindfulness techniques and yoga and all these things which are about sedating. And
Uh-huh.
right, I think it's important to know how to sedate and to come into oneself, but that's not the whole picture, right? That's almost like a landing place. But then how can we, in a sense, really honor all the different aspects of who we are through our expression and movement behavior? Because we certainly have enough containment in culture.
we we have it. Isn't it funny though? I mean, we do have containment in culture in a certain aspect, but on another level, there's no ritual. There's no uh place to go. You know, there's we've lost we've become untethered from nature and from um you know, coming of age and all of those kinds of initiatory rites and things like that that give us some um direction in life, you know. So there's like this, there is both. It feels like to me like there's like this tightness of containment, but then there's also like, and what do we do? So like there's like, you know, this ungroundedness, you know.
Right.
We're like a guy in a barrel going over the Niagara Falls in a way, you know. You're totally contained. Where in the fuck are you going, you know?
Right. But I think that also explains that what we've seen over the last 20, 30 years, the rise of Christian nationalism,
Mm,
kind of, because you look at a lot of these evangelical churches, especially out in the exurbs, they're community centers,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And people
Absolutely.
come, and Sunday service, people are singing.
Mhm. And
There's
there's
that.
a sense of like purpose, groundedness, community, togetherness. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in a sense, unfortunately, sprinkled in all of there. is
Correct.
kind of a reactionary politics. And, that's something that I think is really interesting. Is like, okay, how do we, those of us in the kind of the more secular world, not that we don't appreciate spirit and mystery and all that, but those of us in the secular world, how can we create those kind of group experiences that fulfill that need for belonging, transcendence, expression,
Mhm.
all that? Because those are, that's a powerful technology to sing together, to chant together, to dance together, right? All of that. And to be still together. Really powerful communal experiences. How can we tap that?
So beautiful. I want you to come in and talk to my community. I have membership community. I call it Pan's Sanctuary. And
Yeah.
it is about all of that. So I'm gonna we'll talk about that. But I know that would
We'll
be,
talk and discuss.
it's interesting, Jamie, because I have this whole list of questions, things that I wanted to cover, and I was just kind of looking at it, going over and like, yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, like you're
Okay.
we're amazing speakers. You're an amazing speaker, but it's just when somebody is so immersed and embodied in their work and in this kind of work, in a way, you can't have a bad conversation. And one of the well, I want to come to some of the things that you're doing right now, and you have a retreat called Embodying Nature. Is that what's coming up in October? Maybe I can't remember. Yeah,
October.
tell us
Yeah.
about that a little bit, and what is it? What makes it maybe different from some other retreats that people might go to?
So one of my mandates is to help people slow down so that there's more space between things. And one of the great things about doing a 5 day retreat in nature. So we have I always like to think of it, it's kind of like Vision Quest light. So we have, kind of like, a
We're not going to
house.
starve each other, like
Yeah, right.
any,
Yeah,
flogging
not
or
have to
any, yeah,
go, that whole like, kind of traditional route of, no food or water. But no, it's like have the comforts of home, you know, food, of indoor movement space so that we, work with these different technologies consciously and then move outside to experience the natural world from the lens of contemplative practice, moving into expressive relationship.
Mhm.
So I created a map that I call 5-part relational map uh, of witnessing, really just receiving. So, like, really giving attention, being in one's breathing body, receiving, then mirroring. I mean, that's really the way we all learn mirroring. So, mirroring the shape, the directionality of tree, letting that become its own movement practice that then takes us into contacting tree, getting up close and personal,
Mm.
different parts of the body making contact.
Like
Um,
extreme tree hugging.
right, but it's
No, but yeah,
but that's like the stereotype,
just taking it to that more visceral, deeper,
well, and
personal level.
right, diversifying, so you can, make contact with your back, your front, your cheek, and then begin to respond. And what is response? What comes out? Is it sound that comes out? Is it movement that comes out? One of the things I like about response is the sky's the limit. Response does not need a reason. It just is. And so encouraging that spontaneous response. And then the fifth part of the map is rest. Just stop, pause, check out, dream a little bit, and then go back into exploration. So So in this immersion, I always think of myself as the assistant teacher. I'm just, kind of setting things up for
Mhm.
then nature to really speak directly to the soma. And so from these kind of excursions in the natural world back and forth, writing, finding ways to then give voice to our writing. Because, of course, when we speak our writing out loud, it takes on a whole new dimension.
Oh
Uh,
man, this is
so it's a constant cycle and recycling and going deeper and deeper into place. And just you know, many of I used to do these retreats at Sea Ranch. So this is going to be my first uh, embodying nature on the East Coast in the hills of Massachusetts at the beginning of fall. So there'll be, just the colors of
oh
the
man.
leaves and the changing. It's just an exquisite time of year to be in the
And
Northeast.
so what are the dates on that exactly, and how can people find it? Do you remember, or
It
can you share
is,
with us?
of course, I don't remember I just know I'm doing it before I go.
Well, we're going to be putting the links in the.
Right. It's October 3rd through 8th.
Okay,
And all the information's on my website, somaticexpression.com.
which is a beautiful website, by the way. Just
Thank you.
saying, and very clear, and just and so much so much information on it, and I enjoyed perusing it. I mean, I've seen it over the years, but I sat down with it for
Hmm. Well, thank you for taking the time. Yeah.
yeah, really
Yeah.
wonderful stuff, and good inform. I mean, good information. Like it's very explanatory. Like you get what you're doing from
Oh, nice.
from the.
Nice.
So yeah. So that's where people can get a hold of you, and this is the new thing that you're doing. And do you have any other upcoming things or ways that people can get in touch with your work, online stuff, anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a variety of what I call doses.
Doses
Dose.
of Jamie.
Dose.
Take them in small doses.
Right.
Well, you're ready. You got to
So
titrate into that one.
so I do these things for an hour. Anybody could sign up for free things called breathing room. So it's just
Yes.
kind of an introduction to working with breath and structure and attention, which gives people a sense of what they can expect from the embodied mindfulness, module one, which is a 12-week course, once a week for an hour and a half, really working with all the various kind of somatic tools to cultivate practice. And that, of course, is for most people the most difficult thing,
Mhm.
cultivating a daily practice. And for me, that's my major mission as an educator, which is, through this repetition and innovation and your ownership of the practice, then you have ways that you can tailor it for yourself, which is ultimately important for me because we're all unique organisms on the planet. So we might as well capitalize on that
Yeah.
and really do those things that nourish us because we're really the only being that can nourish ourselves consciously, right? We're fed by all these different inputs, but ultimately we each are driving our own car. So,
Yeah.
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 There's all kinds of things on the
All
website.
kinds of
Just go to
things.
the
Yeah.
calendar on the website. There's different ways to hook into the work and things I'm doing. But yeah, the embodying nature one is, just it's one of my favorite things to do just because I mean, what's not to love? Being in the woods for, 5 days and just like
Yeah.
getting rid of, kind of just like taking a pause from life. And one of the things I'm doing now is I'm offering scholarships to environmental and social activists because those are really the people on the front lines right now doing work and that they really need to be supported, and we all need to do our work, of course, and contribute. But people who really are just, this is their full-time lives. It's like, yeah, so there's that. And
And
it's
a
great.
lot of those people don't really, take care of themselves, or they don't feel like they have the time, or, they're so involved in their mission that it's, just, and it's an unfortunate statistic that a lot of those folks, get really sick and or die, because they aren't embodied in that way, or they need more of that.
It's like the black lesbian activist Audre Lorde said, which I thought was really just like but pivotal. She says self-care is not self-indulgence. Self-care is a political act, and it's just like it's so true.
I
It's
remember.
because and particularly and not to be too binary about it, but as we know, a lot of women have been conditioned to constantly give and to give and to give. And so, a lot of my female students have reported how it is a big shift for them, really to take care here, to give to themselves, to unhook from responsibility, to nurture their own life and how empowering that is. So, and that's really, I'd say, ultimately what I want to do is empower people to listen to themselves, to respond to themselves, and to take care, to steward the garden of their own selves.
Jamie, we are going to need to bring this to an end, unfortunately. I mean, I really feel like this conversation could go on for so much longer, and there's so many places that we didn't really get to that I think could be really powerful too. So maybe you'll agree to come back on again at some point in the near future. I do have one last question, sort of a wild card question.
Oh,
Not really, but if your body could speak one sentence to the modern world right now, what would it say?
life is hard. Life is joyful. Life is a mystery. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, with that, Jamie, we will.
James, thank you. This was delightful. This was
Yeah,
delicious. And I so enjoyed our conversation and my flights of fancy here and there.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There's a connect there. Appreciate it. All right, my friend. Love you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for once again tuning in to the Somatic Pleasure Podcasts. If anything moved you or landed deeply or sparked a question, please be sure and leave a comment and share this with all your friends and the folks you feel like might benefit from the information here. Please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. Every Friday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and be sure to join the live Q&A afterwards. And if you want to keep this conversation going, please join us inside Pan's Sanctuary, a private community for seekers of truth, lovers of embodiment, and somatic mischief makers. Hope to see you there. Have a great day.